John's breath caught in his throat as he guided his patrol vehicle down the winding roads of Yellowstone National Park. The sun-dappled trees and vibrant wildflowers that usually brought him such joy now seemed to mock him with their cheerful beauty. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he approached the secluded turnout, one he knew all too well from his years of service. There was Sarah's car, his wife's sleek sedan, parked where it had no business being on a Tuesday afternoon. John's training kicked in automatically. He pulled over, positioning his truck to block any easy escape routes. His movements were fluid and practiced as he exited the vehicle and approached on silent feet. The muffled sounds reached his ears before he saw anything. Grunts, gasps, the unmistakable rhythm of passion. John's jaw clenched. He'd known, hadn't he? Deep down, he'd sensed something was off. The late nights at the office, the sudden interest in yoga classes, the way Sarah's eyes would dart away when he asked about her day. He crept closer, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, to preserve some shred of plausible deniability. But he was a ranger. Damn it, it was his job to investigate, to protect, even if what he was protecting now was only the tattered remains of his dignity. The scene that greeted him when he peered through the car window was exactly what he'd feared, and somehow infinitely worse. Sarah, his wife of 8 years, was riding in ecstasy in the arms of another man. A stranger? No, not quite a stranger. John recognized him as Mark, one of the wealthy tourists who'd been staying at the lodge. For a moment, John simply stared, his mind refusing to fully process what his eyes were telling him. Then, moving with the detached precision of a man in shock, he pulled out his phone and began taking photos. The angle of Sarah's arched back, the possessive grip of Mark's hands on her hips, the tangled pile of discarded clothing lay strewn across the car floor. Evidence, that was what it was. Cold, hard proof of betrayal. John's finger hovered over the button to dial park security. One push, and he could have them both hauled out in handcuffs. Public indecency charges filed before Sarah's hair had time to settle back into place. But no, that wasn't who he was. He was John Buford, dedicated park ranger, protector of Yellowstone's natural wonders. He wouldn't let this treachery, compromise his integrity or his duty. With a Herculean effort, John forced himself to turn away from the car. He had a job to do. After all, the park wouldn't patrol itself. He was barely a mile down the road when his radio crackled to life. All units, we've got reports of suspected poachers near the North Ridge. Proceed with caution. John's lips thinned into a grim line. Poachers, of course, because this day clearly needed one more test of his resolve. He flicked on his lights and siren, accelerating toward the coordinates dispatch provided. The familiar surge of adrenaline helped push thoughts of Sarah to the back of his mind, if only temporarily. The poachers' camp wasn't hard to spot. These weren't professionals, just a group of idiots who thought they could bag themselves an elk out of season. John's experience quickly cataloged the telltale signs. Poorly concealed tire tracks, the acrid smell of cigarette smoke, a pitiful attempt at camouflaging their vehicle. Park service. John called out as he approached, one hand resting on his sidearm. Come out with your hands where I can see them. For a tense moment, there was only silence. Then, a flurry of movement as 3 men burst from the underbrush, sprinting in different directions. Stop, John shouted, taking off after the nearest suspect. His long legs ate up the ground, muscles honed by years of wilderness patrols serving him well. The poacher zigged and zagged, clearly unfamiliar with the terrain. John, on the other hand, knew every route and rock. He hurtled, driven towards a steep embankment that severed all possible escape routes. The poacher found himself cornered, desperation burning in his eyes. Back off, man, he snarled, brandishing a hunting knife. John's hand tightened on his weapon, though he kept it holstered. Put the knife down, he said, his voice low and steady. You're only making this worse for yourself. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. John could see the frantic calculations running behind the poacher's eyes, weighing the odds, searching for a way out. In that moment, an image of Sarah flashed unbidden through John's mind. Her face contorted in pleasure, lost in the arms of another man. The betrayal hit him anew, a fresh wave of anger threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained control. The poacher must have sensed something shift in John's demeanor. With a snarl, he lunged forward, the knife slashing through the air. John's training took over. He sidestepped the clumsy attack, grabbed the man's wrist, and used the poacher's own momentum to slam him face-first into a nearby tree. The knife clattered to the ground as John efficiently cuffed the struggling man. "You're under arrest," John growled, reciting the Miranda rights with mechanical precision. His heart was pounding, but not from the brief scuffle. No, this was something darker, a roiling mix of rage and hurt that threatened to consume him. As he marched the subdued poacher back to his vehicle, John's mind raced. How long had Sarah been cheating? Was this a one-time transgression, or had she been lying to him for months, years? He secured the prisoner in the back of his truck, barely registering the man's stream of curses and threats. John's world had narrowed to a series of stark realizations. His marriage was a sham, his wife was a stranger, and everything he thought he knew about his life was built on a foundation of lies. The drive back to park headquarters was a blur. John went through the motions of booking the poacher, filing reports, and coordinating with the other rangers to track down the remaining suspects, but within, he was unraveling. As he finally climbed back into his truck at the end of his shift, John found himself gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The facade of the calm, professional ranger was cracking. He needed what? Revenge? Understanding? A time machine to go back and undo the past 8 years? No, what John needed was a plan. And as he started the long drive back to the cabin he shared with Sarah, the wheels in his mind began to turn. He was a ranger, after all, observant, patient, knowledgeable about the intricacies of wildlife laws and park regulations. If Sarah thought she could destroy their marriage without consequences, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. John pulled into the driveway of their modest cabin, steeling himself for the confrontation to come. The lights were on inside, warm and inviting. How many times had he come home to this site, feeling a sense of peace and belonging? Now, it felt like a cruel joke. He took a deep breath, collecting himself. Then with deliberate movements, he retrieved his phone and the printouts he had made of the damning photos. Evidence in hand, John strode toward the front door. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The domesticity of the scene made John's stomach churn. How dare she act so normal, so innocent, when just hours ago, "Hey, honey," Sarah called out, her back still turned. "How was your day?" John's laugh was harsh, humorless. Oh, it was enlightening. Something in his tone made Sarah freeze. She turned slowly, her eyes widening as she took in John's rigid posture and thunderous expression. "John?" she asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "What's wrong?" Without a word, John tossed the photos onto the kitchen counter. They spread out like a deck of cards, each one a vivid reminder of Sarah's betrayal. Sarah's face drained of color. I can explain," she stammered. "Can you?" John's voice was ice. "Please, enlighten me. Tell me, how did you end up with Mark in broad daylight, in the middle of the park?" Sarah flinched at the crude language, so unlike John's usual measured tones. It's not what you think," she tried again, weakly. John's eyebrow arched. "Really? Because I think it's exactly what it looks like. My wife, my partner, spreading her legs for some rich tourist while I'm out there risking my life to keep this park safe." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "John, please. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" John's voice rose, the calm facade cracking. "You threw away 8 years of marriage for something that didn't mean anything?" Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but was cut off by the shrill ring of John's work phone. For a moment, they both stared at the device, the outside world intruding on their private drama. John answered with a curt, "Ranger Buford." The voice on the other end was tense, urgent. "John, we've got a situation. There's a forest fire spreading near the park's western border. We need all hands on deck for evacuation efforts." John's jaw clenched. "Of course, because this day just kept getting better and better. I'm on my way," he said shortly, ending the call. He turned back to Sarah, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. "This isn't over," he said. "We'll finish this discussion when I get back." Without waiting for a response, John strode out of the cabin, slamming the door behind him. As he climbed back into his truck, he felt a grim sense of purpose settling over him. The forest fire was a welcome distraction, a chance to lose himself in the work he knew best. And when it was over, well, John had some planning to do. Sarah might think she'd gotten away with her little indiscretion, But she was about to learn that actions had consequences, especially when you betray a man who knows the wilderness like the back of his hand. The acrid smell of smoke filled John's nostrils as he sped toward the fire. In the distance, he could see the angry orange glow of the fire, a stark contrast against the darkening sky. The forest he had sworn to protect was burning, and for once, John was grateful for the distraction. As he pulled up to the command center, a flurry of activity greeted him. Fellow rangers, firefighters, and volunteers rushed about, their faces etched with determination and worry. Chief Ranger Mike Barnes spotted John and hurried over, relief evident in his weathered features. "John, thank God you're here," Mike said, clapping him on the shoulder. "We've got campers stranded near Elk Creek. The fire's moving faster than we anticipated, and the wind isn't doing us any favors." John nodded, pushing thoughts of Sarah and her betrayal to the back of his mind. There would be time for that later. Right now, lives were at stake. "What's the plan, Chief?" Mike unfurled a map on the hood of a nearby vehicle. "We've got two groups," he explained, pointing to marked locations. "A family of 4 here and a pair of hikers here. The smoke is too thick for air evacuation, so we're going in on foot. I want you leading Team Alpha to extract the family. Johnson's taking Team Bravo for the hikers." "Understood," John said, already mentally mapping out the safest route. "Any word on how the fire started?" Mike's expression darkened. "Early reports suggest it might have been some careless campers, but we'll worry about that later. Right now, let's focus on getting everyone out safely." John gathered his team, a mix of experienced rangers and trained volunteers. As he briefed them on the situation, he felt a familiar calm settle over him. This was what he was meant to do: protect, serve, and save lives. The team moved out, their path illuminated by the eerie glow of the approaching fire. The heat was intense, the smoke thick and choking, but John pressed on, his senses alert for any sign of the stranded family. They found them huddled by a stream, wide-eyed with fear. The youngest, a girl, clung tightly to her mother, her small frame trembling as the inferno drew nearer. No more than 6 years old, she was clutching a stuffed animal to her chest, tears streaking her stained face. "Park Service," John called out, relief flooding through him. "We're here to get you out." The family's relief was palpable. John quickly assessed the situation. The parents seemed mobile, if shaken. The older boy had a nasty-looking cut on his arm, probably from a fall in the panic to escape the fire. The little girl was a wild card, clearly terrified and possibly in shock. John knelt down to her eye level, his voice gentle. "Hey there, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Lucy," the girl hiccuped. "Well, Lucy, that's a nice bear you've got there," John said, nodding to the stuffed animal. "I bet he's pretty brave, huh?" Lucy nodded hesitantly. "Well, we're going to need all the brave bears we can get to help us get out of here. Do you think you and your bear can be really brave and help us?" A small smile broke through Lucy's tears. She nodded more firmly this time. "That's my girl," John said, standing. He turned to the rest of the family. "All right, folks, here's the plan. We're going to move fast, but stay together. If anyone needs to stop, you let me know immediately." "Understand." The family nodded, clinging to each other. John's team formed a protective circle around them, and they set off through the smoky forest. The journey back was harrowing. The fire seemed to be closing in from all sides, the heat oppressive. Twice they had to backtrack and find a new route when fallen trees blocked their path. Lucy stumbled at one point, nearly falling into a smoldering log. John scooped her up without breaking stride, settling her on his hip. She buried her face in his shoulder, her little body trembling. "It's okay, Lucy," John murmured. "You're doing great. Your bear is being so brave, and so are you." As they finally broke through to the safety of the fire line, John felt a surge of triumph. He'd done it. Despite everything, the betrayal, the anger, the hurt, he'd stayed focused and saved lives. The family was swiftly escorted away by the waiting paramedics. Lucy's mother turned to John, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. We thought we were going to die out there." John nodded, suddenly too exhausted for words. As he watched the ambulance drive away, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Mike, looking as grimy and worn out as John felt. "Hell of a job out there, Buford," the chief said. "You saved those people's lives." John managed a tired smile. "Just doing my job, Chief. Mike's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing something amiss in John's tone. Everything all right? You seemed, I don't know, more intense than usual out there. For a moment, John considered unloading everything. The photos, Sarah's betrayal, the turmoil raging inside him. But no, this wasn't the time or place. Just tired, he said instead. It's been a long day. Mike nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. Well, go get some rest. We've got the situation under control now, thanks in no small part to you. As John trudged back to his vehicle, he felt the adrenaline from the rescue fading, leaving him hollow. The anger he had managed to push aside came rushing back, along with a newfound determination. He had proven to himself that he could keep his cool under the most extreme circumstances. Now, it was time to apply that same focus, that same ruthless efficiency, to dealing with Sarah and her lover. John climbed into his truck, his mind already formulating plans. He was a ranger, after all, patient, observant. And now, he had a new mission, to make Sarah understand exactly what she had thrown away and to ensure that her betrayal came with a price. The forest fire may have been contained, but a new blaze was just beginning to burn within him. This time, he had no intention of putting it out until justice was served. The cabin loomed before John, a familiar silhouette against the star-studded sky. He sat in his truck for a long moment, steeling himself for what was to come. The day's events swirled relentlessly in his mind. Sarah's betrayal, the violent confrontation with the poachers, the harrowing forest fire rescue. It felt as though a lifetime had passed since he last crossed his own threshold. Drawing a deep breath, John stepped from the vehicle, his boots crunching loudly on the gravel driveway, the sound unnaturally sharp in the profound stillness of the night. As he approached the front door, he noticed Sarah's car still parked in its usual spot. So she hadn't fled, at least not yet. He entered the cabin, where the familiar scent of pine and Sarah's favorite lavender candles now mingled with the acrid smell of smoke clinging stubbornly to his uniform. The living room lay shrouded in darkness, but a sliver of light spilled from beneath the bedroom door. John's jaw tightened as he moved toward it, his footsteps deliberately heavy on the wooden floor. He pushed the door open without knocking, his eyes immediately drawn to the suitcase splayed open upon the bed. Sarah stood by the dresser, her back to him, frozen in the act of folding a blouse. Going somewhere. John's voice was low and controlled, yet carried an undercurrent of steel that made Sarah flinch. She turned slowly, her face a mask of guilt and defiance. John, I didn't hear you come in. Evidently, he replied, leaning against the doorframe. You seem quite focused on your packing. Hot date. Sarah's eyes flashed with sudden fire. Don't you dare. You have no right to, no right. John's laugh was harsh and humorless. That's rich, coming from you. Tell me, Sarah, when exactly did I lose the right to know my wife was seeing someone else? Sarah's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. It's not what you think. Oh, John arched an eyebrow. Please, enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife of 8 years decided to throw away our marriage for a quick roll in the hay with some rich tourist. It wasn't like that. Sarah's voice rose, a note of desperation creeping in. Mark, he understands me. He listens to me. When was the last time you truly listened? Did you ever truly listen, John? When was the last time you saw me as more than just a ranger's wife? John felt as if he had been punched in the gut. Is that what this is about? You felt neglected, so you decided to spread your legs for the first man who paid you a compliment. Sarah recoiled as if slapped. You don't get to judge me, John. You have no idea what I have been going through. Then tell me, John said, his voice suddenly weary. Help me understand how we got here. Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it again. She turned away, her shoulders slumping. It doesn't matter now. It's too late. Too late for what? John asked, a sense of foreboding settling over him. Sarah took a deep breath, then turned to face him. I'm pregnant, John. The words hit him like a physical blow. John staggered back a step, his mind reeling. What? I'm pregnant, Sarah repeated, her voice stronger now. And it's Mark's. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the bedside clock. John stared at Sarah, searching her face for any sign that this was some cruel joke, but he saw only resignation and a flicker of something that might have been regret. How? John's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. How long have you known? Sarah's hand unconsciously drifted to her still flat stomach. A few weeks. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. John's laugh was bitter. Well, congratulations. You found quite the way to break the news. Sarah's eyes flashed. What was I supposed to do, John? Pretend it was yours? Trap you into raising another man's child? You could have not cheated in the first place. John roared, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. You could have talked to me if you were unhappy. You could have done literally anything other than destroy our marriage. Sarah flinched at his outburst, but quickly rallied. Our marriage was already dead, John. You were just too blind to see it. John felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet. How had they come to this? How had he missed the signs that his wife was so desperately unhappy? So what now? He asked, his voice hollow. You run off with Mark to raise your love child? Sarah's expression hardened. It's not that simple. Mark, he's not exactly thrilled about the situation. Oh, I bet, John said, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Let me guess. He's not looking to play daddy to a park ranger's cast-offs. Don't, Sarah warned, her eyes flashing. Don't you dare judge me, John. You have no idea what I've been going through. Then enlighten me, John said, spreading his arms wide. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to run off and leave me holding the bag. Sarah's chin jutted out defiantly. I'm not running anywhere. This is my home too, John. And if you think I'm going to let you push me out, push you out. John interrupted incredulously. You're the one with the suitcase, Sarah. You're the one who decided to blow up our life for a quick fling in the park. It wasn't like that, Sarah shouted, tears streaming down her face. You have no idea what it's been like being married to the perfect ranger. Always putting the park first, always the hero. Do you have any idea how lonely I've been? John felt as if he'd been slapped. So this is my fault because I take my job seriously? It's not about the job, John, Sarah said, her voice softening slightly. It's about us. When was the last time we talked? When was the last time you looked at me and saw me, not just the ranger's wife? John opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He thought back over the past few months, trying to remember the last time he and Sarah had really connected. The realization that he couldn't easily recall such a moment hit him like a punch to the gut. That doesn't excuse what you did, he said finally. Nothing excuses betraying our vows like that. Sarah's eyes hardened. Maybe not. But it happened, John. And now we have to deal with the consequences. John's mind raced. The consequences weighed heavily upon him. A child, his wife pregnant with another man's baby. The thought made his stomach churn. I won't raise it, he said flatly. I won't pretend to be daddy to your mistake. Sarah's face crumpled. John, please. I'm not asking you to. No. John cut her off. You don't get to ask me for anything. Not anymore. Sarah's expression shifted, a dangerous glint entering her eye. Fine. If that's how you want to play it, then I have no choice. I'll tell everyone at the park what really happened. How the great John Boer drove his wife into another man's arms. How he abandoned her when she needed him most. Enough. John's voice cracked like a whip. You really want to go down that road, Sarah? Because I promise you, it won't end well for you. Sarah faltered, taken aback by the steel in John's voice. What do you mean? John's smile was cold, predatory. You seem to have forgotten who you're dealing with, Sarah. I'm not just some run-of-the-mill park ranger. I know this park inside and out. I know every law, every regulation, and I have friends in high places. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You try to ruin my career, and I'll make sure you and your lover boy face the full consequences of your actions. Public decency charges, interfering with park operations. Hell, I bet if I dig deep enough, I might even find some evidence of wildlife trafficking. After all, Mark seems like the type who might want an illegal souvenir or two. Sarah's face drained of color. You wouldn't I? John's eyes were hard. You don't know me very well anymore, Sarah. You made sure of that when you decided to mess around behind my back. He turned away, striding towards a door. Over his shoulder, he called, Oh, and by the way, I've already started divorce proceedings. My lawyer will be in touch. Sarah's voice, small and broken, stopped him at the threshold. John, please, can't we talk about this? John paused, his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, he stood there, unmoving. He allowed himself to remember the good times, the laughter, the shared dreams, the quiet moments of contentment. But then the image of Sarah in Mark's arms flashed through his mind. There's nothing left to say, he said, not turning around. You made your choice, Sarah. Now you get to live with it." With that, he walked out, leaving Sarah alone in the bedroom they had once shared. As he made his way to the guest room, John felt a curious mix of emotions: anger, hurt, betrayal, but also a sense of satisfaction. Sarah had underestimated him, thought she could manipulate him with threats and tears. But she had forgotten one crucial fact. John Buford was a ranger to his core, and rangers were nothing if not resourceful, patient, and intimately familiar with the lay of the land. As he lay down on the unfamiliar bed, John's mind was already whirring with plans. Sarah might think she had won this round, but the game was far from over, and John intended to make sure that when all was said and done, justice would be served, in the park and in his personal life. With that thought, he closed his eyes, allowing exhaustion to finally claim him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but John was ready. After all, he had sworn to protect Yellowstone from all threats, and right now, Sarah and Mark were the biggest threats of all. John Buford sat at his desk in the ranger station, the soft glow of his computer screen illuminating his face in the pre-dawn darkness. His fingers flew across the keyboard, eyes narrowed in concentration as he delved deeper into Mark's background. The familiar scent of pine and coffee filled the air, a stark contrast to the ugliness he was uncovering. It had been 3 weeks since Sarah's betrayal had shattered his world. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, replaying every moment of their marriage, searching for clues he might have missed. But now John's pain had crystallized into something harder, colder, a determination to see justice served. As he scrolled, the evidence mounted, each piece a step closer to the truth he was resolved to uncover. Through public records and social media profiles, a pattern began to emerge. Mark was not merely a wealthy tourist with wandering eyes. No, there was something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface. John's breath caught as he stumbled upon a series of forum posts, carefully anonymized but unmistakably linked to Mark through a trail of IP addresses and linguistic quirks. The content made his stomach turn. Discussions of rare animal parts, coded language about acquisitions and shipments. "Got you, you bastard," John muttered, a smile twisting his lips. He leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This was bigger than he had imagined. Mark was not just a homewrecker. He was involved in illegal wildlife trafficking. The irony was almost enough to make John laugh. His wife had thrown away their marriage for a man who embodied everything John had sworn to protect the park against. With practiced efficiency, John began compiling the evidence. He knew he could not be the one to bring Mark down directly. The conflict of interest was too glaring. But he could set the wheels in motion. An hour later, an anonymous tip was winging its way to the Fish and Wildlife Service. John sat back, a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation coursing through him. The trap was set. Now all he had to do was wait. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, John's radio crackled to life. "All Rangers, we've got a situation developing. Budget cuts are coming down from Washington. The chief wants everyone in the conference room at 0800 for a briefing." John's jaw clenched. Of course, because dealing with his cheating wife and her criminal lover was not enough of a challenge. He stood, stretching muscles stiff from hours hunched over the computer. As he made his way to the conference room, John's mind was already worrying with possibilities. Budget cuts meant threats to the park's conservation efforts, to the very ecosystem he had sworn to protect. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was an opportunity here, a chance to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. By the time John took his seat in the crowded conference room, a plan was already taking shape in his mind. Let Sarah have her fling with Mark. John had bigger fish to fry. And when he was done, he would have saved the park, cemented his reputation, and ensured that justice was served in more ways than one. Chief Ranger Mike Barnes stood at the front of the room, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the assembled rangers. The usual buzz of conversation died down as he cleared his throat. "All right, folks, I won't sugarcoat this. We're facing some serious budget cuts from Washington. They're talking about slashing our funding by 30% next fiscal year." A murmur of dismay rippled through the room. John leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. This was worse than he had anticipated. Mike held up a hand for silence. I know it's bad. But we're not going down without a fight. We need ideas, people. How can we drum up public support?" Show the bureaucrats in D.C. why Yellowstone needs every penny of our current budget, and then some. For a moment, silence reigned. Then John stood, feeling every eye in the room turn to him. "Chief, if I may." At Mike's nod, John continued, "We've been playing defense for too long. It's time we went on the offensive." He strode to the front of the room, his voice gaining strength as he outlined his plan. "We need to make Yellowstone the talk of the nation, not just as a tourist destination, but as a vital part of our national heritage. We organize a series of high-profile events, guided tours for influential journalists, educational programs for schools across the country, partnerships with environmental groups." John's eyes blazed with intensity as he spoke. "We showcase the unique ecosystems we protect, the groundbreaking research being conducted here. We make it clear that cutting our budget doesn't just hurt the park. It hurts America's future," he finished. John became aware of the stunned silence in the room. Then, slowly, a smattering of applause began, growing into a thunderous ovation. Mike clapped John on the shoulder, a broad grin splitting his face. "Now that's what I'm talking about, John. I want you to spearhead this campaign. You've got carte blanche to make it happen." As the meeting broke up, rangers crowding around to offer congratulations and ideas, John felt a fierce satisfaction. This was his chance to save the park, to prove his worth, and to set the stage for his ultimate vindication. He barely noticed Sarah's absence from the ranger station, the whispered rumors about her sudden leave of absence. Let her play house with Mark, John thought. He had work to do. Over the next few weeks, John threw himself into the campaign with single-minded determination. He coordinated with PR firms, reached out to environmental groups, and gave impassioned interviews to anyone who would listen. All the while, he kept a careful eye on the investigation into Mark's activities. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they were turning. John just had to be patient. It was during a particularly grueling day of back-to-back media appearances that John received the call he'd been waiting for. A winter storm had blown in, unexpectedly stranding a group of hikers on one of Yellowstone's more treacherous trails. John didn't hesitate. He assembled a rescue team and headed out into the howling wind and driving snow. The conditions were brutal, visibility near zero, but John pressed on, driven by a combination of duty and a burning need to prove himself. Hours passed in a blur of icy wind and treacherous terrain. John's muscles screamed with exertion, his lungs burning with each frigid breath, but he refused to give up. Finally, through the whiteout conditions, John spotted a flash of color, the hiker's tent, barely visible against the snow. "Over here," he shouted, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. The rescue was grueling. The hikers were hypothermic and barely conscious. John and his team worked with practiced efficiency, stabilizing the victims and preparing them for evacuation. As the rescue helicopter descended, its rotors whipping the snow into a frenzy, John felt a surge of triumph. This was what he was meant for. This was where he excelled. The story of the daring rescue spread like wildfire. John found himself thrust into the national spotlight, hailed as a hero. He gave interviews, appeared on morning shows, always careful to steer the conversation back to the importance of Yellowstone and the critical need for funding. As he stood in front of yet another TV camera, John felt satisfaction. Let Sarah have her fling with Mark. John was changing the world, one interview at a time. But even as he basked in the glow of public adoration, John never lost sight of his ultimate goal. Justice was coming for Mark and Sarah, and when it did, John would be ready. The raid on Mark and Sarah's home came on a crisp autumn morning, just as the leaves were beginning to turn. John watched from a discreet distance, his face impassive as he observed the FBI agents swarming the property. He could see Sarah's shocked expression as she was let out in handcuffs, Mark following close behind. A small, vindictive part of John wanted to reveal himself, to see the realization dawn in Sarah's eyes that he had orchestrated their downfall. But no, John was smarter than that. He played the long game, and now it was time to reap the rewards. As the last police car pulled away, John allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time to capitalize on his newfound fame and ensure that Yellowstone received the funding and protection it deserved. Over the next few weeks, John threw himself into his campaign with renewed vigor. He organized rallies, gave impassioned speeches, and leveraged every connection he had made during his media blitz. Environmental groups flocked to support him, drawn by his genuine passion for conservation and his newfound celebrity status. Politicians, sensing a winning issue, began to align themselves with John's cause. Through it all, John maintained his composure, never letting on about the personal turmoil that had set this chain of events in motion. To the public, he was John Buford, dedicated ranger and tireless advocate for America's natural treasures. But in the quiet moments, when the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds dispersed, John allowed himself to feel the full weight of his actions. He had destroyed Sarah's life, ended her relationship with Mark, and potentially ruined both their careers. Was it worth it? As John stood at the edge of a cliff, watching the sunset over Yellowstone's breathtaking landscape, he knew the answer was yes. This park, this wilderness, was worth any personal sacrifice. As for Sarah and Mark, they had made their choices. Now they would face the consequences. John's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, seeing a message from his lawyer. The divorce proceedings were moving forward smoothly. With Sarah's infidelity and criminal charges, John was poised to come out of this with everything. The house, his reputation intact, and not a penny owed in alimony. He pocketed the phone, turning his gaze back to the sunset. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But for now, John allowed himself to savor this moment of triumph. The wilderness of Yellowstone stretched out before him, a testament to the power of nature and the importance of preservation. And John Buford, ranger and protector, stood ready to defend it, no matter the cost. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of the courthouse as Mark and Sarah emerged, blinking in the harsh light. Their faces were drawn, eyes haunted by the weight of their recent ordeal. The click of cameras and murmur of reporters created a cacophony that surrounded them, marking the culmination of their public downfall. The atmosphere appeared to mock their newfound freedom. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her swollen belly, a gesture that did not escape the notice of the vultures from the press. Mark wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders, glaring at the assembled crowd. "No comment," he growled, guiding Sarah toward the waiting car. As they sped away from the courthouse, Sarah finally allowed herself to exhale. "What are we going to do, Mark?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Mark's jaw tightened. "We fight. We clear our names. There's no way in hell I'm going down for this." But even as the words left his mouth, doubt gnawed at him. The evidence against them had been overwhelming. Rare animal parts discovered in their home, incriminating emails, and financial records that painted a damning picture of illegal wildlife trafficking. It made no sense. Mark knew he had been careful, covering his tracks at every turn. How had everything unraveled so spectacularly? As the car wound its way through the streets, a thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. "John," he muttered, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Sarah turned to him, confusion etched on her face. "What about John?" Mark's eyes narrowed. "Think about it, Sarah. Who else would have the knowledge, the access, the motive to set us up like this?" Sarah's face paled. "But how? Why?" Mark let out a bitter laugh. "Why? You're carrying his wife's child, Sarah. I'd say that's motive enough." The realization settled over them like a shroud. They had underestimated John Buford, written him off as a simple park ranger. Now they were paying the price. As they pulled up to their home, a place that now felt more like a prison, Mark's mind was already racing with plans. They needed to find proof of John's involvement, to turn the tables on him before it was too late. Little did they know, John Buford was several steps ahead, orchestrating the final act of his carefully crafted plan. Miles away, in the heart of Yellowstone National Park, John stood before a gathered crowd of journalists. Politicians and environmental activists gathered beneath the vast sky, where the crisp mountain air carried the invigorating scent of pine and the palpable aura of possibility. As he stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonant and clear, carrying across the expectant throng. "Welcome to Yellowstone. Welcome to America's crown jewel." As John launched into his address, his eyes swept over the crowd, taking in the familiar faces, the governor nodding along with enthusiasm, the head of the Sierra Club hanging on his every word, and even a few senators who had flown in for the occasion. This moment was the culmination of months of meticulous planning, of sleepless nights, and endless strategizing. Today, John would secure Yellowstone's future and, In the process, cement his own legacy. For too long, John continued, his voice rising with fervent passion, we have taken this natural wonder for granted. We have allowed bureaucrats in Washington to treat our national parks as mere line items on a budget, to be slashed and cut at will. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience as John pressed on, building toward his crescendo. But no more. Today, we stand united. Today, we declare that Yellowstone is not just a park. It is a national treasure, a living, breathing testament to the wild heart of America. As he spoke, John felt a familiar rush of purpose and clarity. This was where he truly belonged, not confined within some stuffy office, nor entangled in domestic life with a woman who had betrayed him. Here, in the untamed wilderness, fighting for what truly mattered, he found his calling. And so, John said, his voice softening to a near whisper that compelled the crowd to lean in, I am proud to announce the launch of the Yellowstone Preservation Initiative, a comprehensive plan not only to protect our current funding but to expand it, to invest in cutting-edge research, to enhance our conservation efforts, and to ensure that Yellowstone remains a beacon of natural beauty for generations to come. The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the majestic landscape. John allowed himself a small, satisfied smile as he stepped back from the podium. He could see the excitement gleaming in the eyes of the gathered dignitaries and could practically feel the momentum of their shared commitment. Feel the swell of support building, but John was not yet finished. As the crowd began to disperse for the planned tour of the park, he caught the eye of a particular journalist, one he had cultivated carefully over the past few months. Emily, he called out, his voice pitched low. A word. The young reporter hurried over, notepad at the ready. What is it, Ranger Buford? John's face grew somber. There is something else you should know, something that threatens the very heart of what we are trying to protect here. Emily's eyes widened. Go on. With practiced gravity, John began to spin his tale of corruption in the Park Service, of a wildlife trafficking ring operating right under their noses. And at the center of it all, Mark and Sarah. As Emily scribbled furiously, John wondered, is he going to appear? But he pushed the thought aside. This was necessary. This was justice. By the time John finished his off-the-record chat with Emily, he knew the story would be splashed across every major news outlet by nightfall. Mark and Sarah's desperate attempts to clear their names would be crushed under the weight of public opinion. As John rejoined the tour, pointing out Yellowstone's natural wonders to the assembled VIPs, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Everything was falling into place. The park would be saved, his reputation cemented, and Sarah, well, Sarah had made her choice. Now she would have to live with the consequences. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a crisp autumn day that seemed to mock the turmoil brewing in Mark and Sarah's modest home. The newspaper spread across the kitchen table told a damning tale. Their faces splashed across the front pages, headlines screaming of corruption and betrayal. Sarah's hands shook as she poured herself a cup of decaf, her swollen belly a constant reminder of the life growing inside her, a life that now seemed destined to begin in the shadow of scandal and shame. Mark paced the small kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear. What do you mean you cannot take the case? He snapped. We are innocent, damn it. We are being set up. The lawyer's voice on the other end was apologetic but firm. No one wanted to touch their case. The evidence was too overwhelming, the public outcry too fierce. As Mark slammed the phone down, Sarah flinched. What are we going to do? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark's eyes hardened. We fight fire with fire, he growled. If John wants to play dirty, we will show him just how dirty we can get. Sarah's brow furrowed. What do you mean? A cruel smile twisted Mark's lips. You still have those emails, do you not? The ones where John talked about bending the rules, looking the other way for the right price. Sarah nodded slowly, realization dawning. But those were just talk. He never actually did anything. It does not matter, Mark said, his voice cold. It is enough to cast doubt, to make people question the great John Buford's squeaky clean image. As they hatched their desperate plan, neither Mark nor Sarah noticed the unmarked van parked across the street. Inside, a team of FBI agents listened intently, recording every word. Miles away, in his office at Yellowstone, John Buford allowed himself a small smile as he received the update. Mark and Sarah were playing right into his hands. The confrontation, when it came, was as explosive as a Yellowstone geyser. John stood in his office, the warm glow of success still surrounding him from the previous day's triumph. The funding bill had passed, ensuring Yellowstone's future for years to come. His phone had not stopped ringing with congratulations and interview requests. So when Mark burst through the door, Sarah wobbling behind him, John was almost prepared. Almost. "You son of a bitch." Mark snarled, his face contorted with rage. "You set us up." John raised an eyebrow, the picture of calm. "I am not sure what you are talking about, Mark, but I am going to have to ask you to leave. This is a restricted area." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and defiance. "John, please. We know it was you," she pleaded. "The evidence, the raid. It's all too convenient." For a moment, John allowed himself to truly look at Sarah, the woman he had once loved, now swollen with another man's child. "I think the stress of your situation is making you paranoid," John said calmly. "I suggest you focus on your legal defense. I hear you're going to need it." Mark's hand shot out, grabbing John's shirt collar. "Listen here, you self-righteous prick. We've got dirt on you too. Those emails about taking bribes, looking the other way. How do you think that'll play with your adoring public?" John didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You really should be careful about making threats, Mark, especially when you're already in so much trouble." With deliberate movements, John reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick file filled with documents and photographs. "You see, I've been expecting this, and I came prepared." As John laid out the evidence, recordings of their conversations, financial records that went far deeper than what had been made public, emails implicating not just Mark, but Sarah in the trafficking ring. He watched the color drain from their faces. You can't," Sarah stammered. "Oh, but I can," John said, his voice cold. "And I will, unless." Mark's eyes narrowed. "Unless what?" "Unless you leave now, drop this ridiculous attempt at blackmail, plead guilty to the charges, and never darken Yellowstone's doorstep again." The silence that followed was deafening. John could practically see the wheels turning in Mark's head, the desperate search for a way out. It was at that moment that Sarah let out a gasp, doubling over. "The baby," she panted. I think it's coming." John froze. This wasn't part of the plan. For a split second, he saw not his cheating ex-wife, not the woman who had betrayed him, but simply a human being in pain. "We need to get her to a hospital," he said, his ranger training kicking in. Mark looked at him suspiciously. "Why should we trust you?" "Trust you?" John's laugh was bitter. "You don't have much choice, do you?" And so, in a twist of fate that would have seemed impossible just hours before, John found himself behind the wheel, speeding towards the nearest hospital with his ex-wife in labor in the back seat and her lover trying to comfort her. The irony was not lost on him. The hospital waiting room was a study in tension. John sat rigidly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, his ranger uniform out of place among the worried family members and expectant fathers. Mark paced nervously, alternating between shooting venomous glares at John and anxiously checking the door to the maternity ward. Hours ticked by. John found himself wondering, not for the first time, how he had ended up here. This should have been a moment of triumph. The park was saved, his reputation secure. Instead, he was waiting for his ex-wife to give birth to another man's child. Finally, a nurse emerged. "Mr. Howard?" she called, looking at Mark. "You can come in now. It's a boy." As Mark rushed past, the nurse turned to John. "Are you family?" John opened his mouth, then closed it again. What was he exactly? I'm her ex-husband," he said finally. The nurse's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "She's asking for you." Steeling himself, John followed the nurse into the room. The sight that greeted him was surreal. Sarah, looking exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle. Mark hovering protectively at her side, his earlier anger seemingly forgotten in the face of new fatherhood. "John," Sarah said softly. I'm glad you're here." John approached the bed cautiously, feeling like an intruder in this intimate moment. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. Sarah held out the baby. "Do you want to hold him?" John recoiled slightly. "I don't think that's a good idea." Sarah's face fell. "John, please. I know we've hurt each other. I know things can never be the same. But this innocent child, he doesn't deserve to suffer for our mistakes." For a long moment, John stood there, the weight of her words hanging in the air between them. Frozen, He then slowly reached out and took the baby. The child was warm and impossibly small, his tiny fist curling around John's finger with surprising strength. In that moment, something shifted. The anger, the bitterness, the thirst for revenge that had driven John for so long. It did not disappear, but it receded. In its place was a startling clarity. "I can't be a father to this child," John said quietly, handing the baby back to Sarah. "And I won't sign the birth certificate." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You'll regret this, I promise." John's smile was sad. "Enjoy single motherhood, Sarah? No alimony from me." Sarah's expression darkened. "You don't know what Mark is capable of. He'll ruin your life." John's laugh was cold and empty. "Oh, don't worry. I already took care of him. Let's just say you won't be seeing each other for years. Let me remind you, you both are out on bail now." The color drained from Sarah's face as John laid out the extent of his evidence against them. The carefully planted clues, the anonymous tips, the damning financial records. "Why?" Sarah whispered. "Why go to all this trouble?" John's voice was quiet but firm. "Because you betrayed not just me, but everything I stand for. The park, the wildlife, the very ideals I've dedicated my life to protecting. You and Mark, you're just symptoms of a larger disease, and I intend to root it out." As if on cue, the TV in the corner of the hospital room flickered to life with breaking news. John's campaign had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. The funding bill had passed, securing Yellowstone's future and catapulting John into the national spotlight as a conservation hero. Sarah stared at the screen, then back at John, comprehension dawning. "You used us," she said softly. "All of this. It was never just about revenge, was it?" John smiled. "Let's just say I learned to multitask." With that, he turned and walked out of the hospital room. His phone buzzed, a message from his lawyer. The divorce was final. No alimony, no shared assets. As John climbed into his truck and set his course for Yellowstone, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The past few months had been a crucible, testing him in ways he had never imagined, but he had emerged stronger and more dedicated than ever to his true purpose. The familiar silhouette of the mountains loomed on the horizon, and John allowed himself a small, genuine smile. He was going home, to the wilderness he loved, to the job that defined him. Sarah, Mark, the baby, they were all part of a chapter that was now firmly closed. Ahead lay new challenges, new battles to fight, but John Buford was ready. After all, he was a ranger, and rangers always protected what mattered most. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.